I'm Brian, 39, and for a while I thought I had it all figured out. Back in my college days in Charleston, South Carolina, I met Lily. We were serious. The kind of serious where you think the world bends around the two of you. I worked long shifts at a bar downtown, saving every penny to buy her a ring. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. The plan was simple: save up, propose, build a life together. What I didn't count on was how small plans feel when someone's already decided you're just a placeholder. Lily's mother never liked me. From the moment I shook her hand at Thanksgiving, I felt her eyes sizing me up like I was something sticky tracked in from the street. I tried to win her over, bringing flowers to family dinners, making sure I was always polite. But her smiles were brittle, her comments sharp. A bartender, huh, she once said, her voice light and laced with a bitter laugh. Still, Lily was different. Or so I thought. We shared everything: dreams, plans, debts we were struggling to keep up with. Or, at least, I shared everything. She shared just enough to make me believe we were on the same page. I kept my head down, worked, and let her study for her grad program. Until that Christmas morning when her younger sister, drunk off cheap champagne and a little too eager for drama, spilled everything. She told me, in front of Lily's mother and a table full of family, that Lily was pregnant. And not just pregnant by a man her mother had set her up with. A man who had everything Lily's mother thought I lacked: money, a real job, status. The smugness in Lily's mother's face was something I'll never forget. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a calculated move, like she'd been waiting for this opportunity to sweep me aside and replace me with someone she approved of. And here's the twist: the man wasn't some random family friend. It was her mother's own business partner, someone she'd known for years, someone she'd encouraged Lily to see on the side while I was breaking my back behind the bar, stacking cash to buy her a ring. That Christmas morning, Lily begged me to stay, said it didn't matter, that we could raise the baby together, that we could pretend it was mine. But the look in her mother's eyes said otherwise. It was a setup from the start, and I was the fool who fell for it. I didn't say much, just stood up, left the table, and walked out into the cold Charleston morning. My hands were shaking, not from the chill, but from the realization that I'd spent years loving someone who was just biding her time for a better offer. Years later, Lily tried to worm her way back into my life. Sent letters, left voicemails, said she made a mistake, that she realized too late what she lost. But I didn't even entertain the idea. I deserved better. And for the first time in years, I actually believed it. After that Christmas morning, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. Everything I'd been building crumbled overnight. In January, I quit my job at the bar. I couldn't stand behind that counter anymore, pouring drinks and pretending everything was fine, when inside me was a hollow ache. I rented a small apartment on the outskirts of Charleston, windows taped shut, neighbors blasting their TVs to drown out their own thoughts. It fit me. I wanted silence. I wanted solitude. At first, I tried to pretend things were normal. I made a schedule, went to the gym, cooked my own meals. But every morning I woke up with the same feeling, like I'd been turned inside out and left in the cold. Lily's family never reached out again. Her mother probably thought everything had gone according to plan. And Lily? She disappeared. For years. Like I'd just been a tolerable chapter in her life she could close and forget. But I didn't forget. Especially not those eyes. Her eyes, as she begged me to stay. There was no love in them. No regret. Just fear that her perfect plan was falling apart. A year later, I started working again, but not in a bar. I got a job as an assistant manager at a small appliance repair company. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. Sometimes I caught myself wondering how life might have turned out if I'd stayed. But those thoughts didn't linger, because staying would have meant resigning myself to being used and betrayed again and again. And then, for years later, she showed up. Lily sent a letter, an actual letter, on paper like it was the 90s. She said her life hadn't worked out the way she'd hoped, that the man she left me for was gone, that she was left alone with the baby, that she finally realized her mistake and wanted to start over. The letter was long, filled with regret and apologies. I read it once, then twice, and finally, I tore it into tiny pieces and threw in the trash. I never heard from her again. But sometimes sitting alone in the quiet, staring at the ceiling, I think about how close I came to giving everything to someone who never valued me. I moved on, not in the grand, dramatic sense where you meet someone new, fall in love, and erase the past. No, my moving on was slow, like recovering from frostbite. I rebuilt, piece by piece, starting with the basics: work, my own space, and rediscovering the things that made me feel human again. I joined a local running club in Charleston. Not because I loved running, but because it got me out of my apartment, out of my own head, out of the loop of replaying everything that had gone wrong. Some of the guys from the club introduced me to poker nights, quiet Friday dinners, low-key weekend trips. They didn't ask questions about my past, and I didn't offer answers. It was a relief to be with people who didn't see me as a cautionary tale or a lost cause. I was just Brian to them. That's how I met Melissa. She wasn't part of the club, but she showed up at one of the poker nights, invited by a friend. She had this quiet confidence, a way of listening like your words actually mattered. She wasn't flashy or overly cheerful. She just got it. The weight of disappointment. The silence of starting over. We talked more than I'd talked to anyone in years. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't as broken as I thought. I wasn't fixed either, but maybe I was on my way. Here's the twist. A year into knowing Melissa, I found out she knew Lily. Not just knew her, they'd been classmates in college, shared classes, and even been part of the same study group. Melissa never mentioned it. Maybe because she didn't want to open old wounds. Or maybe because she didn't think it mattered anymore. But it did to me. Not because I still cared about Lily, but because it reminded me that life's connections are messier than we like to admit. When I brought it up, Melissa looked me dead in the eye and said, I know. I didn't want to be just another person from your past. I wanted to be your future. That floored me. For the first time since everything went to hell, I felt like I had a choice. A real one. I won't lie. Hearing Melissa's words was like being handed a key I didn't know I needed. She wasn't asking me to forget the past. She was just offering a path forward. A path where I could be more than a cautionary tale. I wasn't ready to rush into anything, and Melissa wasn't the type to push. But knowing she was there, knowing she was willing to be part of my story if I let her, that mattered more than I could admit. But here's the thing about life. It doesn't just let you move on cleanly. About 6 months after that conversation, Lily resurfaced again. Not with a letter this time, but with a message on social media. I didn't even realize we were still connected. It was a simple message, one line that nearly made me drop my phone. I heard you're seeing someone. Can we talk? My gut reaction was a sharp, bitter laugh. Can we talk? After everything? But then I realized something darker. She wasn't just reaching out because she missed me. She was reaching out because she'd heard I might actually be happy. And that scared her. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely angry. Not sad, not broken, but angry. I didn't respond. Instead, I blocked her number, her social media, every possible way she could worm back into my life. It felt like slamming a door and throwing away the key. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel guilty about it. I felt free. Life has this way of testing your resolve. Right when you think you've finally caught your breath. Just when I was feeling like I could maybe trust again, it threw a curveball. A few weeks after I blocked Lily, I got a call from a mutual friend, someone I hadn't heard from in years. She said Lily was telling everyone who'd listened that I'd abandoned her when she was pregnant, painting me as the villain in her perfect little tragedy. According to Lily, I had led her on, then vanished when she needed me most. I almost dropped the phone laughing. I'd heard twisted versions of the past before, but this was a new level. For a split second, I thought about clearing my name, reaching out to people to set the record straight. But then I realized something I should have known all along. The people who mattered, the ones who truly cared about me, already knew the truth. I didn't need to explain myself to Lily's pity audience. Instead, I leaned into the quiet. I focused on work, on small things that gave me joy. Walks by the Cooper River, quiet dinners with Melissa, learning to cook something more than pasta and toast. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, finally, without her shadow looming over it. I thought that was the end of it, that Lily would fade into the background like a bad memory you eventually forget. But life, as always, had other plans. One rainy afternoon, as I was leaving work, I spotted her, standing under a dripping awning near my building, as if she'd been waiting for me. She looked different, tired. The polished, put-together Lily I once knew was gone. This was a woman beaten down by her own choices, her pride chipped away by time. For a moment, I felt a pang of something close to pity. But it passed. She tried to talk to me, stepping into my path, saying she just needed a few minutes, that she wanted to explain, to apologize. I kept walking, not out of cruelty, but because I finally understood that listening to her meant opening the door to a past I'd spent years closing. She called after me, her voice breaking in the rain, but I didn't turn back. Not once. I wish I could say that ignoring Lily was a clean break, a final, triumphant moment where I reclaimed my life. But it wasn't. Not really. The truth is, Even after everything, a part of me still carried her shadow. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, as though she was still standing outside in the rain, waiting for me. It wasn't love or regret. It was a haunting, the stubborn echo of a chapter one never truly closed. I tried to drown it in work, in those quiet dinners with Melissa, in long runs by the river where the rhythm of my feet on the pavement almost convinced me I was outrunning my past. But clung to me, whispering doubts I thought I'd silenced. Did I overreact? Should I have heard her out that day in the rain? What if she really was sorry? I knew better. I knew those thoughts were poison, slow-acting but lethal. Still, they gnawed at the edges of my peace, fraying the calm I'd worked so hard to build. I didn't tell Melissa about seeing Lily. I didn't want to risk bringing her into the mess, didn't want her to feel like she was a consolation prize or that I was still tethered to someone who'd so thoroughly betrayed me. Then one night, it all came crashing down. Melissa invited me over for dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and wine at her apartment. We sat on the couch afterward, her head resting against my shoulder, a rare moment of quiet where it felt like the world outside had paused just for us. And that's when my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but I felt my stomach tighten as soon as I saw the first line of the message. I really need to see you. It's important. Please. It was Lily. Melissa must have sensed the shift in me because she sat up, concern in her eyes. Everything okay? She asked softly. I hesitated, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the screen. For a second, I thought about lying, brushing it off as some work thing. But then I realized that if I wanted this, if I wanted something real with Melissa, I had to be honest. It's Lily, I said finally, my voice low. She's been trying to reach me. She's not giving up. Melissa was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. What are you going to do? I didn't have an answer. The truth was, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I could block her again, change my number, cut her off completely. But a part of me, the part that was still haunted, wanted closure. Not for her. For me. I didn't want her to keep showing up like a ghost, interrupting my life whenever she felt like it. I wanted to end it on my terms. I need to see her, I said finally. Melissa's lips tightened, but she didn't argue. Not to go back, not to fix anything, just to finish it. For good. The next day, I texted Lily. Told her I'd meet her at a cafe near the old college library where we used to study together. It felt fitting in a way, like bringing everything back to where it began, but this time with me, in control. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at a corner table by the window, her hands wrapped around a mug of untouched coffee. She looked up when she saw me, and for a second, the years melted away. But then I saw it. The same calculated glint in her eyes that had been there the night her sister blurted out the truth. She started to speak, but I cut her off with a quiet, just listen. I told her everything. How I knew about the man her mother set her up with. How I knew it was a setup from the start. How I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. Just done. I told her that the only thing I regretted was wasting so much time on someone who'd never loved me. Not really. And then, as she sat there blinking, I stood up. I hope you get the life you wanted, I said, voice steady. But I'm not part of it. Not anymore. As I turned to leave, she reached out, her fingers barely grazing my sleeve. Brian, please, she whispered. But I didn't stop. I walked out of that cafe, into the sharp spring air, and for the first time in years, I felt light. Whole. Finally free. I thought that would be the end of it. Walking away from Lily in that cafe felt like closing a door I've been trying to shut for years. But endings, I've learned, are rarely clean. A few weeks later, I started noticing strange things. Old mutual friends reaching out to check in, messages from unknown numbers asking vague questions about my life, Melissa mentioning that someone had asked her if we were serious. At first, I brushed it off as coincidence. Charleston's a small city, and word travels. But then one night, while walking back to my apartment from the grocery store, I noticed a figure leaning against the building across the street. They weren't doing anything, just standing there, watching. When I looked directly at them, they turned and walked away. It sent a chill down my spine. The next morning, I got a message from an unknown number. I'm sorry. I just wanted to see you one more time. I'll stop now. Please don't be mad. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a signature. Lily. That was the moment I realized that what I thought was closure was really just her finding new ways to pull me back in. I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. Not fiery, not screaming. Just a deep, cold resolve. I wasn't going to let her rewrite the story. Wasn't going to let her linger in the corners of my life like some ghost I couldn't shake. I changed my phone number, switched social media accounts, even considered moving to a different part of Charleston. But Melissa convinced me to stay. You've already given her enough, she said quietly. Don't let her push you out of your own life. So I stayed. But I was different now. I kept my circles smaller, my boundaries firmer. I stopped trying to explain myself to people who didn't deserve answers. I focused on the people who mattered: Melissa, my running group, the small circle of friends who knew me as more than the guy with the messy past. For the first time in years, I was living my life, and it felt like breathing again. A few months passed, and things finally started to settle into something resembling normal. Melissa and I grew closer, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was building a life with someone who chose me. Not out of convenience or obligation, but because she genuinely wanted to be there. It wasn't some whirlwind romance, but it was real, and real felt good. Then, on a quiet Sunday morning, I got the letter, an actual, physical letter, in handwriting I recognized immediately: Lily's. My gut clenched the second I saw it in the mailbox. Melissa was still asleep, the apartment filled with the peaceful hush of a day that was supposed to be easy. I stood there for a long minute, debating whether to open it. I shouldn't have. I knew that. But curiosity has a way of clawing at you, even when you know it's going to hurt. Inside was a simple note: I'm moving away. I wanted you to know. I'm sorry for everything. Take care. There was no return address. No hint of where she was going or why. Just those few lines, like a confession whispered into the dark. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel triumph. If anything, I felt a quiet sadness. Not for her, not for what we'd lost, but for the fact that something that had once meant so much to me was now reduced to a few scrawled words on paper. I showed the letter to Melissa that afternoon. She read it, then folded it neatly and handed it back. She's gone, she said simply. Let's not waste another minute thinking about her. And just like that, it felt like the last thread tying me to Lily snapped. For the first time in years, I didn't feel haunted. I felt light. After that final letter, life didn't suddenly become perfect. I still had nights when I'd wake up in the dark, feeling the old weight of disappointment pressing down on my chest. Some scars take longer to fade, even after you've moved on. But now there was space for hope, for something real. Melissa and I started talking about the future, not in the frantic, desperate way that I once imagined with Lily, but in the quiet, steady tone of two people who'd seen enough to know that nothing is guaranteed. We talked about moving to a bigger apartment, maybe adopting a dog. She mentioned wanting to visit her family in Maine and asked if I'd like to come. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped by someone else's expectations. One night, sitting on our small balcony with a couple of beers and the soft hum of traffic below, Melissa turned to me and said, "You know, you never really talk about her anymore." And she was right. Somewhere along the way, Lily had stopped being the ghost that haunted me. She was just gone. A part of my past, sealed and stored away, like an old photograph you don't need to look at anymore. I guess I don't have much to say about her, I replied, watching the moon rise over Charleston skyline. Melissa smiled, leaning her head on my shoulder. Good, because I think you've finally made room for something better. And maybe, just maybe, she was right. In the months that followed, life settled into a rhythm I'd almost forgotten was possible. Melissa and I made plans, simple ones like weekend hikes, lazy Sundays, and the occasional splurge on a new restaurant downtown. It wasn't dramatic or storybook perfect, but it was ours. And that was enough. One evening, as we were walking by the riverfront, hand in hand, I found myself thinking back to those years with Lily, not with longing or regret, but with a strange sense of clarity. I realized how much of myself I'd given away back then, pieces chipped off by compromise, by silence, by trying to be what someone else wanted. I thought of all the times I let her rewrite our story, cast me as the villain in her self-made tragedy. And for the first time, I wasn't angry. I was just done. As we reached the end of the path and the sun dipped below the horizon, Melissa squeezed my hand gently. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm just thinking," I replied, my voice soft, "about how far I've come." And it was true. I'd spent years trying to understand what went wrong, to fix something that was never meant to be whole. I blamed myself for loving too much, for not seeing the signs, for being too patient, too forgiving. But standing there with Melissa's hand in mine and the soft hush of the river behind us, I finally understood. It wasn't about fixing the past or rewriting the story. It was about learning to let go, to walk away from what was broken, and to embrace the life I deserved. A life with someone who chose me, not out of guilt or obligation, but because they saw me, flaws and all, and still stayed. I looked at Melissa, her smile calm and steady, and felt something settle deep in my chest, a quiet certainty I hadn't known in years. "I'm glad you're here," I said simply. And that was it. No grand declarations, no dramatic endings. Just a man who'd finally found peace in the quiet, in the steady presence of someone who truly saw him. Because in the end, it wasn't about Lily or her mother or the lies. It was about me. About finding the courage to close the chapter and start a new one on my own terms.